If your phone dies and your wallet is gone, the modern city doesn't just become inconvenient, it becomes a system you can no longer interface with. And within minutes, your risk profile changes in ways most people never consider. Urban environments are engineered around constant access to identity, communication, and transaction systems. Remove those, and you are no longer a participant. You are an anomaly. The immediate danger is not dramatic collapse, but quiet disconnection. You cannot call for help, cannot navigate efficiently, cannot prove who you are, and cannot easily access food, water, or transport. From an emergency management perspective, this is a failure of redundancy because most individuals rely on a single digital node, their phone, for multiple survival critical functions. The misunderstanding is that cities are inherently safer because resources are nearby, but proximity without access is meaningless. A supermarket full of food is functionally useless if you cannot pay. And a hospital is harder to reach if you cannot communicate symptoms or summon assistance. The hidden science lies in systems dependency and cognitive load. When your tools vanish, your brain must compensate, and under stress, decision-making quality drops sharply due to limited working memory and increased cortisol levels. Studies in human factors and crisis psychology show that people without navigation aids take longer routes, make riskier crossings, and are more likely to enter unsafe areas simply due to disorientation. The survival implication is immediate. You must shift from convenience-based living to resource-based thinking, prioritizing water, shelter, and situational awareness over everything else, because the city will not adapt to you. As time progresses into the first few hours, hydration becomes the first invisible pressure point, not because water is unavailable, but because access is controlled. Public fountains are rare, many buildings require entry permissions, and purchasing bottled water is no longer an option. The danger here is subtle dehydration, which impairs cognitive performance long before physical symptoms become obvious. The common misunderstanding is that dehydration is only a concern in wilderness or extreme heat, but urban dehydration is accelerated by walking on concrete, exposure to pollutants, and lack of shade in built environments. The hidden science involves thermoregulation and evaporative cooling. Urban heat islands can raise ambient temperatures several degrees higher than surrounding areas, increasing sweat loss even during mild conditions. Research in environmental physiology confirms that even a 1-2% drop in body water can reduce attention, memory, and decision-making accuracy. The implication is that you must locate water through alternative means, public restrooms, mosques, restaurants willing to provide tap water, while conserving movement and avoiding unnecessary exertion. This forces a behavioral shift. Instead of moving constantly, you begin to anchor yourself near reliable resources, reducing energy expenditure. The situation escalates as daylight fades, because hydration, fatigue, and uncertainty combine to degrade judgment precisely when environmental risks increase. Nightfall introduces a different category of threat, one rooted in visibility and social dynamics rather than physical scarcity. Without a phone, you lose your primary light source, navigation tool, and connection to social networks, which means your ability to assess safe routes is drastically reduced. The danger is not simply darkness, but unpredictability, urban crime patterns, traffic risks, and environmental hazards all increase when visibility drops. The misunderstanding is that staying in motion keeps you safer, but in reality, unnecessary movement at night increases exposure to unknown variables. The hidden science comes from criminology and situational awareness studies, which show that individuals who appear disoriented or out of place are more likely to be targeted, not because of who they are, but because of how they move and behave. Your posture, pace, and eye movement become signals that others interpret instantly. Evidence from urban safety research indicates that confident, purposeful movement reduces the likelihood of unwanted attention, even if the individual is actually uncertain. The survival implication is counterintuitive. You must simulate normalcy while internally operating in a heightened state of analysis, choosing well-lit areas, avoiding bottlenecks, and positioning yourself near predictable human activity rather than isolated spaces. As fatigue deepens, your ability to maintain this controlled behavior declines, increasing the probability of error. By the midpoint of this 24-hour window, sleep deprivation begins to interact with caloric deficit, creating a compounding effect that most people underestimate. The danger is not starvation, but impaired executive function. Your brain begins to prioritize immediate relief over long-term safety, leading to poor decisions such as entering unsafe areas for rest or accepting unnecessary risks for food. The misunderstanding is that missing one day of proper meals is harmless, but the real issue is glucose availability for the brain, which directly affects reasoning and impulse control. The hidden science is tied to neurobiology. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning and judgment, becomes less active under fatigue and low energy conditions, while the amygdala, associated with emotional responses, becomes more reactive. This shift has been documented in sleep studies and explains why people under stress make decisions they would normally avoid. The implication is that you must prioritize safe rest over constant searching, even if it feels counterproductive, because a short period of recovery can restore enough cognitive function to make better choices. This marks a transition from reactive survival to controlled endurance, where conserving mental clarity becomes as important as securing physical resources. As the final hours approach, the cumulative effects of isolation, fatigue, and limited resources create a critical threshold where small mistakes carry amplified consequences. The danger is no longer a single factor, but the interaction of multiple degraded systems, hydration, cognition, awareness, and mobility, all operating below optimal levels. The misunderstanding is that survival in a city is simply a matter of waiting it out, but in reality, prolonged disconnection increases vulnerability over time. The hidden science here is systems failure under stress. When multiple subsystems degrade simultaneously, the probability of cascading failure rises exponentially, a principle observed in engineering and disaster response models. Evidence from emergency scenarios shows that individuals who maintain structured routines, even in limited conditions, are more likely to stabilize their situation and recover. The survival implication is clear. You must impose order on chaos, creating simple priorities, secure water, maintain visibility, control movement, and preserve mental clarity, because structure reduces cognitive load and prevents panic-driven decisions. What began as an inconvenience has revealed itself as a systemic challenge, exposing how deeply modern survival is tied to invisible infrastructures and how quickly those systems, once removed, force you back into fundamental human resilience.